Imagine someone going from the best shape of their life, feeling unstoppable, to barely being able to lift a spoon to their mouth to even feed themselves. Well, that someone was me. One day, I was sprinting down the football field and leading a wrestling team as a 3-year team captain, working out and more fit than most of my friends. The next moment, I was stuck in bed where even lifting a spoon felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and going to the washroom felt like I was running a marathon. See, I've lived the highs and peaks of physical fitness and the lows of the unexpected, crippling burnout to the extreme. This is my journey from peak fitness to battling an illness most doctors couldn't even diagnose. So join me as I expose the harsh truth about extreme burnout, the struggles I went through, and most importantly, I'm gonna show you how I fought back to reclaim my life, to go from surviving to thriving.
I can take on anything now in my life.
I'm now currently living a life in which I never thought I would be able to ever live again.
Now, if you're watching this video right now, you're probably somebody who was very fit before, who's very active. Maybe you were an athlete, maybe you were in competitive sports, or you were just in leisure fitness activities. Maybe you were a hiker, maybe you just like going to the gym casually, but you're watching this because all of a sudden you're dealing with all these strange symptoms, this unrelenting fatigue, and something just doesn't feel right. You're not who you used to be. And that person was me. Now, you're probably watching this video looking at me saying, well, Miguel, you don't look like you burned out. You actually look pretty fit now. And yes, today I'm very fit. I have my health back and then some. I'm actually more fit and more active, and I have better health than I used to have. However, like I said, I used to feel like I was Superman walking around, and then within a handful of months, I was barely able to lift my head off the bed. I remember I had lost about 30 pounds of solid muscle. I couldn't even stand up on my own 2 feet because whenever I tried that, my legs would be shaking, right? And I got so deconditioned that I needed help from my 72-year-old grandma just to get to the washroom. And I could only go to the washroom about 3 times a day. So the question is, how did I go from this to this? And more importantly, how did I make my way back to thriving health after going through this tough and difficult journey? Now, there's so many things I could talk about because yes, there's a physical side of things where you lose your muscle, you're not as fit as you used to be, your cardio's down, you're deconditioned, and you just can't keep up, not only with your old pace of life, but with the rest of the world. Not only are you not fit, but you're unable to keep up. So just some background of, my situation. Growing up, I was always very, very active. I was always the kid who was jumping around. I was always running after my friends. I was very active. I was that kid at recess or lunch break. I'd come back completely drenched in sweat because I was playing soccer, playing football, all these different sports, and I just could not sit still. And even after school, I'd be in all these sports, and even after my sports, I would get home at about 5 or 6 or 7 p.m. and I had an older brother and we were always wrestling. So that's when I felt most alive, and it kind of became my identity over all these years. And we're going to talk about that whole identity loss that comes with this lifestyle change, this drastic lifestyle change, because it is a huge identity shift. So over the years growing up, I had built up this identity of I am an athlete. Not only that, but anything I set my mind to, I know I can overcome it with hard work, which down the road, that played into how I ended up burning out, but I'm gonna dive deep into that in a little bit here. But growing up, I was in lots of different sports. I was always very active. I was always moving. It was very difficult for me actually to sit still. So even in class, I'd be the kid sitting there and I'm like shaking my leg, I'm tapping on the desk, I'm looking around. I just could not sit still for more than a few minutes at a time. And the only reason I think they didn't, feed me some medication to calm me down was because I managed to get good grades. But I could not pay attention in class. I was the kid who was always messing around and, I was always fidgeting. But I kept up my grades so that way I wouldn't get in trouble for doing all those things. But it was a way to make up for all this activity that I was doing. Now, fast forward to my teenage years, I got into even more intense sports like football and wrestling. And when I was about 15 years old, that's when I started really doing heavy weight training. Of course, it started light, but we were doing big compound movements, bench press, deadlifts, squats, sprints, timed runs, agility drills, all of these different things to train for all these different sports I was doing. And I was becoming very, very fit. I could feel myself getting stronger. I could see in the mirror that I was growing muscles, and I almost became addicted to this feeling of growth, of this pursuit of ultimate fitness. And that became my identity. You know, I was a student athlete. I felt like I couldn't go a day without missing a workout. It was weird. Even on the weekends, you know, I'd be doing push-ups or sit-ups because I just wanted to look my best. And fast forward after that, after I graduated from high school, and you know, I had been team captain for the football team for a couple years. I was wrestling team captain for multiple years. I'd been in many tournaments. I had played many competitive sports games. I played rugby, did track and field, and I wanted to become a personal trainer. I said, you know what? I want to be the best personal trainer in my city. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this. And that's when I started to push myself more and more. Even when I was going to university, I remember my first semester, I would go to university and then I do a door-to-door sales job. And then on top of that, I would work out no matter what. It didn't matter if it was 8 p.m. at night or 6 a.m. in the morning or 2 a.m. in the morning. I had to get a workout in every single day. And I was extremely structured around the food I was eating because I was trying to maximize my results. And I felt that in order to make more gains, I had to do more and more. So I'd be stacking these things onto my body, just really trying to squeeze the most potential, or at least I thought that's how you squeeze the most potential out of the time you have in the day. And I'd be listening to all these audio tapes and these motivational videos that to get the best body, it's supposed to be suffering, it's supposed to be painful. And so that's kind of how I wired my brain to go after all of my fitness goals. And it became something very extreme. Like I said, there were times when I couldn't sleep at all. And it got to the point where I just started working out at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m. And we actually have to rewind the clock a little bit because when I was in high school, I actually started drinking protein shakes, which, you know, there's nothing too bad about protein shakes, but it went from protein shakes to taking pre-workout. To get that upper edge. I was always looking for that upper edge. I would never do anything illegal like steroids or anything like that, but I would take lots of pre-workout. And it started with one scoop here and there, and eventually I thought, you know what? This school is full of athletes. Let me go ahead and sell pre-workout to all of these athletes. And I had this stash of pre-workout in my locker. And what's the biggest rule for, you know, selling these types of things? They say don't dip into your own supply, but that's exactly what I did because I had all these different flavors in my locker. I had like blueberries, strawberries, so I started drinking all of them because it just tasted so good. It was like juice to me, but it also made me feel great. Now, at the time, obviously I'm 18, 19 years old. I feel like Superman, and I'm just chugging these things. You know, it started with 1 scoop a day, then 2 scoops a day, then sometimes even 3 scoops a day. And then my body started to rely on it. And it wasn't until I was about 19 years old, that's when I started feeling the symptoms. And it started very small. Like I would have some palpitations, then it started with insomnia, and then it started with a racing mind. I just couldn't shut my thoughts down. It's like my mind was going 24/7. And on those nights where I was really tired and it was about 1 or 2 a.m., but in my mind I still had to get my workout in, I would take pre-workout. So obviously if I'm working out at 2 a.m. in the morning and I'm taking pre-workout, I'm not gonna go to sleep. So sometimes I just stay up the whole night and then go to school the next day and work. But I was trying to squeeze the most out of my day. And so one day, I remember it was getting so intense that this was about a year after my initial palpitations and my initial really intense bouts of insomnia. This one time, it was a few weeks where I was actually getting shaky, right? Like I would hold my hand out and it was shaking and I didn't know what was going on. I felt really stressed out. I felt like I was hitting a wall mentally and physically, right? And pushing through would backfire on me because, you know, I had too much drive. I think my mind was too strong and my body couldn't keep up because the days where my body was screaming at me to stop and take a rest day, mentally I said, no, this is where champions are made. And that's literally what I told myself. I said, this is where champions are made. The people who don't become champions, they sit at home when they're tired. But I have a champion mindset. So let me go into the gym at 2 a.m. because all my competition is sleeping. And it was just an extreme, extreme mindset. There was no flexibility in that mindset at all. And this would later come to backfire on me. So anyways, I start feeling the palpitations and the severe insomnia and the fatigue and even mood swings. I was getting lots of mood swings. A few months prior to that, I couldn't even tolerate it anymore because I would take a scoop and then about 10 minutes later, I'd feel super dizzy for about 15 seconds. Like, I don't know what happened. Felt like the room was literally spinning and then I'd snap out of it. So those were some early warning signs. I laid off the pre-workout, and then after a month or so, I would take it again, and it would happen again until one day I took the supplement and my body completely hit a wall. And it was like night and day. That was the day my life changed forever. This was 2014. It was October 7th. And I remember it like it was yesterday because that is the day my life changed forever. From that point, over the next 4.5 to 5 years, I was not able to work out. But what happened was I took the supplement, and about 2 or 3 hours later, my heart rate went through the roof. I didn't know what a panic attack was back then. I didn't know what anxiety was back then, but I literally thought I was having a heart attack. My heart rate went to about 180, and it stuck there for about an hour. I was in a library actually after working out, and I told them to call the ambulance. And I remember they came in, took my blood pressure, and heart rate was through the roof. Blood pressure was, I think, 150 over 50. Usually it's 120 over 80, but this was 150 over 50. And I literally thought that it was game over, right? So anyways, I go to the hospital, the ambulance brings me there, and they send me home that night. And we asked them, what's going on? What is this? And they said, well, you're just low on electrolytes. Just take a few days off and you'll be able to work out again. And so I thought, okay, it's just electrolytes. This did not feel like dehydration. I have been dehydrated before. I know what it feels like. This was different. It's like something just smashed my nervous system, because when that happened, my body was pulsing. It felt like someone was smashing a hammer on my nervous system, but the hammer was hitting from the inside out, not from the outside in. It's a weird feeling, but it's like my body was pulsing and it felt like it was going to explode. And that was the day my life changed forever. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I would embark on this insane journey of ups and downs and getting hopeful, then getting super depressed, feeling isolated. But anyways, that was the first stage of really what that burnout did. So that first stage actually was denial. I think we have denial when this first hits us, because you have built up this person after all of these years. I mean, my whole life, I was an athlete. This is who I was. And so to not even be able to work out, to be tired going up and down stairs, because for the next few days, my heart was actually sore. I've never actually felt that. I mean, I have run multiple kilometers at a time. I've done multiple very intense workouts, wrestled in many tournaments, which pushed my body to the absolute limits. But this was a whole nother level, because the next day, your muscle is a heart. My heart was literally sore. Like every time it beat, it was sore. So, I was lucky that my heart was in good shape at that time. But when you feel so weak and you're unable to do these things, you just don't want to accept it. And so after a couple weeks, I took it easy. I didn't work for the next few days, and I went back to work. And then after about 2 weeks, I tried working out again. But after that first incident, it felt like a bomb went off in my body, in my nervous system. I felt nauseous, heart palpitations, muscle aches and pains. Brain fog was very severe. Sensitivity to light, sensitivity to food, insomnia, all these different things. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so as I'm getting all these tests done, they had me on a Holter monitor and blood tests, and they ordered all these scans, but they were showing up fine. So I would try to work out again and I'd be okay. But after the workout, holy cow, it felt like I ran 2 marathons and I just felt super sick, but I did not want to accept it. I was in that state of denial because it just felt like a bad dream. I didn't want to accept that this is now my life. And normally, as somebody who was an athlete and somebody who was really into fitness, this is your escape for things. Usually this is your escape for stress. So obviously this whole situation is super stressful, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Anytime you've been stressed in life, you could go to the gym, you could go for a run, you could do some push-ups, you could go blow off some steam and sweat it out. But I could no longer do that. But I wanted to. Physically, my body couldn't do those things, but mentally, I was still that same person. right? But it's almost like overnight, physically, my body just hit a complete wall and said, you're not doing that anymore. We're not going to allow you to run your body into the ground. And so mentally, it was a huge struggle, right? And you do feel like you lose a part of yourself, which is pretty weird. And it almost feels like every time you try to work out, every time you try to fight to get your identity back in the form of working out and you doing the things you used to do, it feels like you're swimming upstream. You're swimming against a current. And it feels like the universe is conspiring against you, because the harder you try to push through, the worse you actually feel, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Because it's like you want this thing so bad, you have good intentions, right? All I was trying to do was get the most out of my time in the day, right? I always felt like we have a limited time on this planet. I was like, let me be as productive as I can. Let me build the best body. And there's only 24 hours in a day. Let me stack this as much as I can so that I can reach my full potential. So my intentions were good. So in my mind, I was thinking, why is my body punishing me like this? Why is the universe punishing me? And it didn't make sense at the time. So that phase of denial lasted probably 3 or 4 months, because I kept trying to go back to the gym and work out every few weeks. But every time I did that, I'd feel worse and worse. So if my health was up here and after that first incident, it dropped down to here, if I had just, taken it easy and worked my way back into the gym very slowly over time, then yeah, I probably would have bounced back after 6, 8, 10 months. But knowing me with my personality, it's just pushed through. And to me, I saw this as a challenge. It was like a challenge of my mentality. It's like, am I going to give up and give up who I am, this athlete, or am I going to push through? Do I have a champion's mindset or not? That was literally my thinking. And my thinking was, I will do whatever it takes. I'd rather die doing this stuff than adjust who I am, because this is who I am. So I was in that state of denial for about 3 or 4 months. But every time I tried to work out and get back to where I was, I'd crash even lower. I'd try to get back to where I was, I'd go even lower. And I'd end up in the hospital, every few months, because I tried pushing through. And eventually, after about 3 or 4 months of trying that and only getting worse and worse, and that phase, by the way, that 3 to 4 month phase felt like 3 to 4 years. Just the mental struggle you go through. It's like time expands when you're going through this suffering. So there was definitely a massive identity loss. Now, denial was the first stage, right? After about 3 to 4 months, eventually that turned to grief. So look like this. Denial then turned into grief. I had to come to terms with the fact that, okay, I can't work out anymore. I can't just go for a run to blow off steam. I've tried so many times to make a comeback, but every time I do it, I just get worse. It's like my body punishes me. And it's strange because it's like a part of me almost died during that phase. I personally didn't die, but a part of me died. That identity, that super athlete, that do whatever it takes no matter what, that unstoppable champion's mind, almost to the extreme, that person died during that phase. But it's not instant. That's the thing. You can't just shift from one identity of somebody who's go, go, go to somebody who's more laid back and is okay with taking rest days. You can't do that overnight. It's almost like you shed off this identity. And it's a very painful transition. And there is a lot of grief because you have to learn to let go of the things that brought you all of these accomplishments in the past. That mentality actually served me very well in the past. It helped me get straight A's. It helped me become team captain. It helped me win some tournaments. It helped me become fit. It helped me look great amongst my peers. It helped me stand out. So this very thing that served me, I was no longer able to use it. It was like a superpower, but now it was working against me. It was like a kryptonite. So it's like a double-edged sword. And when I realized that I cannot use this thing anymore, I was like, man, now what? And it was really sad. I almost had to say goodbye to a part of myself. And I think a lot of people, the reason they struggle with this extreme burnout stuff is because they push deeper and deeper and deeper into it. But the way you fell into this is not the approach that's required to get out of this. You can't just push your way through something like burnout or CFS or a hypersensitive nervous system issue. Burnout, this is just an extreme form of burnout. Not just the stuff where you feel tired. No, this is body aches and pains. This is headaches. This is, blurry vision, lights flashing in your eyes when you're trying to sleep. It's crazy stuff. There's like 50 different symptoms you're feeling. So, it is your nervous system that is shot. But eventually you have to let go of that side of you that caused all of this to happen. Whether you had good intentions or not, maybe you had great intentions, and then you end up with this. So it's like, why is my body punishing me? But at some point you have to just realize that person is not you anymore. Sure, that was you 6 months ago or 3 months ago or a year ago, but that is not you today. Doesn't mean you can't build that up again in the future, but for right now, that approach will not serve you. So that grief phase, I remember my friends would be working out, they'd be going out camping, they'd be doing active things, biking around the seawall. I live in Vancouver, right? And people bike around the seawall here. It's a very active city, and I couldn't take part in any of that. So with that grief, I felt super isolated. I had to tell my friends, hey, I can't hang out, I can't go to the gym. But interesting enough, I was still personal training at the time, trying to push through this thing. So although I wasn't working out myself, I was personal training, which was interesting. And that would bite me in the butt a couple years down the road because I actually sunk deeper into this. So after grief, I just talked about this identity loss, right? Once you completely shed that old version of you and you almost like part ways. When I parted ways with the old Miguel, I was left here with like a blank slate, right? This identity loss. I didn't know who I was. I'm like, if I'm not an athlete, if I'm not this person with an unshakable will to get through any challenge with brute force, who am I? So I was completely lost. I was reading all these books. I remember I got deep into personal development when I could read, when I didn't have enough brain fog. A lot of time would be spent going from doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment. I didn't know what was going on with me. The doctors didn't even know what was going on with me. All my tests were coming back normal, yet I was in the hospital every 3 to 6 months, in the emergency room, getting rushed there because they didn't know what was going on. And I felt like I was slowly dying. And that's one of the worst parts too, is you don't really know what's going on. The doctors don't tell you. They're looking at you like you're crazy because all your tests are coming back fine, and they're looking at you like, well, you look healthy to me. You're 19 years old. You shouldn't be feeling these things. And it's pretty frustrating, right? And you tell them, or at least I told them, said, yes, I know I should be healthy at 19. I know I look healthy, but I feel like I've been hit by a bus every morning. I feel like I just ran a marathon. Like even going to the mall, that's too much for me because there's too much movement. It's too stimulating for me. This is coming from somebody who used to play competitive sports and sports things that required very fast reaction time. I used to thrive in those environments. Now I can't even drive down the street without my heart feeling like it's pounding out of my chest because I'm just so on edge. So that identity loss, it's one of those phases that I went through because I kind of had to reinvent myself. And I remember when things got really bad, I was bedridden for 8 months straight. So I was sick for about 3.5 to 4 years. And I was on and off work because I would get better, then I would get sick again. I would keep trying to make my way back into life. I'd keep trying to exercise again, but then I'd completely crash because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I thought time would solve this issue. If I just wait long enough and eat decently healthy, then, maybe I'll make a comeback. And at the time, I was taking supplements from a naturopath. I was doing IV therapy treatments. We were treating this as an adrenal issue, which my adrenals were pretty shot, actually. My adrenals were pretty tanked out. It was almost flatlined. But those treatments weren't really working, or at least they worked temporarily. But I kept trying to get back into working out or get back into fitness, and I pushed myself too hard. So eventually, towards the later stages of my recovery, I found myself bedridden at my grandparents' house. This was actually 5 months straight, completely bedridden. And when I say completely bedridden, I could not go downstairs for those 5 months. I could not take a shower by myself. My grandma had to sit there helping me wipe my back, wipe my arms, help towel me down and dry me. A lot of times I had to get spoon-fed. And it was really rough because I haven't said this in too many videos, but I couldn't even walk to the washroom a lot of the times. So I had a bucket beside my bed where I literally had to pee in that bucket. I'm sure some of the people watching this, maybe you have to do that as well, maybe even right now. But imagine going from somebody who could deadlift 300 plus pounds, squat 300 pounds, run miles and miles, right? this athlete, and just rolling over in bed to pee in a bucket, that was harder than some of those workouts. Imagine that. So at that point, my identity of being an athlete, that was gone. It was a memory. I knew it happened, but I came to terms with the fact that, like, okay, that Miguel is long gone. I mean, and the more I tried to think about that, the more I tried to play back those times that I wrestled or played football, the more depressed I got, because it just created that gap of where I was and where my ideal life was, or at least where I thought my ideal life was. So yeah, I became a new person. I was like broken, and it wasn't a change for the better at that time. I felt like I was living life up here, and now I was down here. So I'm lying in a bed all day, staring at the ceiling, playing back my life, and I'm thinking, okay, you know what? The past is the past. Doesn't even matter anymore. But always my mind would go back to that. So I had to manually just try to swat that out of my mind and focus on whatever was in front of me. So I kind of felt like a blank slate, but my experience of the world at the time was very negative. So all I felt was pain. All I felt was suffering. All I felt was, just struggle. And every day was a battle just to get to, I remember, noon. I'd try to make it to noon in one piece. I'd have a clock right by my bed, and I'd just be like, okay, Miguel, just make it to 5 p.m. I was having shortness of breath, vertigo, felt like throwing up. My body was pulsing. My legs and arms were on fire. I had migraines. I'd hear ringing in my ears. So every day I was just suffering. I was like, what's the point of all of this? And it got pretty dark. I'm not going to lie. It got pretty dark. So that was identity loss. And eventually, after you go through this phase of identity loss, well, now it's like, what do I do next? I don't know where to go from here. So it turns into this no man's land. And this no man's land, you just don't know where to go from here, right? You don't know where to go. You don't know where to turn to. Your parents can't really get you out of this. They can help you. They can support you. But I remember my dad would be blending food, because after 5 months at my grandparents, we moved me to my dad's place. And that was about a month. But that was really rough. I was just existing, taking up oxygen. I was in a bed all day, and he's bringing me these blended smoothie containers, right? And it wasn't a smoothie. It was rice and tilapia a lot of the times. Sometimes there was chicken, and I could sometimes eat it, but there were days where he had to blend my food, because even rolling over in bed, it felt like there were pins and needles on my body. It felt like somebody was just smashing me with a baseball bat, just rolling over in bed. So, I thought there was no coming out of this. But eventually I get so bad, and that's for a whole nother video where I can go into detail of what made me worse and worse. But eventually I end up in the hospital because things got so severe. I was in the ER at first, right? And then they moved me to the intensive care unit, where I stayed in the ICU for about 1 month, right? And they're running all these tests on me, and I'm in no man's land. That's what I call it, no man's land. You don't know where your life is going to go from here. I didn't even know if I was going to be around tomorrow, because they're injecting me with blood thinners. They're doing all this crazy stuff, and I didn't know what to expect. I'm just holding on for dear life. So I remember it really did feel like no man's land. I didn't know what my life held for. I don't know what was in store for the future. I was just confused, scared, angry, frustrated, feeling sorry for myself. And I just didn't know where to turn from there. And then this is where things changed, because after a month in ICU, finally, the doctor at the time was very helpful, actually. This was the one doctor up to this point who was actually super useful, because up to this point in the previous 4 or 5 years, all these doctors and specialists would look at me like I'm crazy, or they'd look at me like I'm completely normal, like I'm making it up. Or 3, they just say, well, yeah, you're dealing with this thing. Sorry, we can't help you. Good luck. Either that, or there were, private doctors who say, yeah, we can fix this, but you got to pay us all these thousands of dollars. You got to buy this supplement. We have to run 50 bags of IVs to do a whole treatment cycle. And at that time, I'll do anything. So I was putting all these things on credit card and burying myself with debt. But this doctor actually, he looked me in the eye and he said, look, clearly there's something going on here. We haven't been able to see anything on the tests and scans, but I can assure you that we're going to get you out of this, right? I can promise you I will do my best and I'll reach into all my resources. I will look deeply into this because you're a young guy, you have your whole life ahead of you. We're not just gonna let you go home like this. We can't. So we're gonna get to the bottom of this. So after about a month, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then they moved me to this other wing where I actually got to work one-on-one with a psychiatrist. And I think that was my reality check. That was my wake-up call. Not because he told me I was crazy, right? And this is where the tide turned in my journey. Up to this point, things were on a steady decline. Things were going downhill very quickly. And the crazy thing is, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they got a whole lot worse. And I was like, okay, surely it can't get worse than this. Yeah, I can't personal train anymore. I can stay at home, but it can't get worse than this. It's got to get better. Then I try to go do something, and then boom, I reached a whole new low. And then it's like, as I'm getting up, it's like life just took the rug and pulled it from under me. So I drop even lower and lower. So it's like every time I thought I was rock bottom, no, that wasn't a rock bottom. There was a whole nother Mariana's Trench below that. And then when I got to that bottom, there was a whole nother Mariana's Trench below that. So there were like different layers. I call it like the different layers of hell I was going through. But eventually this would be the lowest point. Fortunately. I say fortunately, but I'm fortunate because I was able to meet my doctor, who finally gave me a reality check and helped me accept what was going on, but not just accept it, give me a solution. And that's when things really turned around for me. So he told me that, hey, everything you're dealing with, I know it sounds crazy. I know you've done all these different tests. You've seen all these different specialists, but you've gone on the merry-go-round of tests. You've jumped through all these different hoops in the medical system. You don't have any of these other things. Yeah, you had some adrenal fatigue. Yeah, you had to go on some thyroid medication because your markers were slightly out of range. But the root cause of this, the reason you're in this position is because you have a hypersensitive nervous system. Let me teach you about that. In fact, I've seen people just like you who have been just as bad and they've gotten their lives back. So you're here right now. You've been bedridden in the intensive care unit. You're going to be walking around in 2 or 3 months like a normal person. And I looked at him like, what? Okay, that's interesting, because that's the first time any kind of doctor told me that, one, it was going to be okay. Two, he's seen this before. That was already like finding a needle in a haystack. And number three, he told me he actually has a solution to get me there. So I was like, okay, I'm all ears, because at this point, I don't have a choice. I fully accept I'm where I'm at right now. I fully accept that I can't just jump back into life. That old Miguel is long gone. And that old Miguel, he has been left in the past, because that is the Miguel that got me to this point. I'm okay with letting go of who I was. Just tell me what I need to do to get better. Just show me the roadmap. And so he taught me about the nervous system. He taught me the science of the stress threshold, taught me the science of how anxiety works in the body and how it builds up, and how that can lead to physical symptoms, and how these physical symptoms can lead to a cascade of other symptoms. And everything started to make sense to me. And once it clicked, that's when my recovery finally started taking off. It's almost like I was getting lower and lower and lower and lower for all of these years, right? And when he told me that, it felt like not only did I come out of rock bottom, it's like I bounced off rock bottom. Because when I met him, they rolled me into his office in a wheelchair. And even that was very difficult, just to sit up. I was normally used to laying flat. Couldn't even sit up because my heart rate would be so high. I'd have shortness of breath. So I remember being in his office and I had the shortness of breath, the headaches, the body aches, the tremors, the shaking. And he told me this stuff. Within a week, I was moving around by myself in a wheelchair. A week after that, I was using a walker. A week after that, I was walking on my own 2 feet. And the week after that, so this is after 4 weeks, working with him, I was able to walk out of the hospital on my own 2 feet into the world again. And so that whole phase, right, I dive deep into it in so many other videos, right? I have a whole video up here, actually. It's one of the first videos on this channel where I break down the science of everything he taught me, right? And we also have a recovery science blueprint that I've created, which you can find the link down below, or you can click up here. It is basically everything he showed me to recover. Now, once I got out of the hospital, because my goal eventually was to work out again, and this whole video is to help you go from this place of surviving to thriving. You want to work out again. You want to get your life back. You want to be fit. You want to feel healthy. You want to just feel alive. And that's what this video is all about. So the thing is, I knew I couldn't jump back into working out right away. I knew it was going to be a slow build up, but also that wasn't my priority. I was like, you know what? I'll take what I can get. If I can walk again, that right there is a miracle. So let's just start there. And I started reintegrating back into life. And people ask me, how do you start exercising again after this? Well, for me personally, I did not focus on exercising because exercising means different things to different people. When you're bedridden or when you're in a wheelchair, just doing the dishes, just doing the laundry, just walking into the house and outside of the house, that alone is exercise. And I remember my muscles were so deconditioned that just walking around, just walking to the washroom in the hospital, my hip flexors were extremely sore. My quads, my calves actually were so sore. They were on fire. And I remember one time I actually thought I had a blood clot in my calves because they were just throbbing, so much pain, but that was pure deconditioning. So in reintegrating back into life, that's a longer phase before the exercise actually comes. So, reintegrating back into life, what does that mean? That means being able to see family and friends again, being able to sit at dinners, birthdays, going out to eat with your family, going out to the mall, going out to the park, doing picnics, doing any kinds of activities, driving. All of these little things, they seem little to the average person, but to you, they're like building the foundation again. So these are the things you want to focus on in the beginning, because that in itself is like exercise. You kind of want to wake up the body, wake up the muscles, and you want to do it gradually, right? You don't want to just jump back into things because that's how you get sick again, right? So reintegrating back into life, that took several months. And for me, I really had to focus on not so much getting fit again. It was just getting my life back, right? Getting the foundation down. Because in the past, I always try to get back into working out too soon. But for me, I learned to be happy with where I was at that time and be grateful for what's in front of me. And I think that was one of the key things that helped me move along fairly quickly on my recovery journey. Because within a year of getting out of the hospital, I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 feet. That doesn't mean that I was fully healthy again. I was feeling dozens of symptoms. My heart was pounding. My legs hurt. My head was throbbing. I felt nauseous when I was leaving the hospital, but I felt like $1,000,000 because compared to where I was at, walking out of the hospital was like winning a lottery. And despite feeling the symptoms, when you're at that low of a level of functioning, and that level of just pain and symptoms, anything above that, that is a cherry on top. So I learned to be grateful for any ounce of energy I could get, any ounce of freedom in my body. Just the ability to stand upright, that was a gift. The ability to take a shower again. I had to learn to be grateful for what my body was allowing me to do in that moment, right? And I wasn't trying to race back into life. Was trying to teach me, because I strongly believe that everything happens for a reason. And I've been able to look back and extrapolate this whole experience of suffering. I used to call it suffering. Now I see it as just a lesson that my body was trying to teach me and that what the universe was trying to teach me. It was trying to force me to slow down and appreciate what was in front of me and be grateful for the present moment versus trying to chase this thing, this moving target that was always in front of me. It was always out of reach. Whether it was in fitness, life, anything like that, it taught me to be present. And so integrating back into life was actually one of the most exciting phases when I learned how to appreciate the small things and feel grateful for what was in front of me. Food tasted better. Breathing fresh air felt better. It felt more fresh. Being in the sunshine, it hits differently when you go from the trenches, not being able to feel sunlight on your skin for 5 months straight. It hits different, when you go from down here and then you go back to the basics up here. But you need to learn to appreciate those small things. So reintegrating back into life, that's where I was building up my threshold again, because I had to pretty much start from nearly zero, right? I literally started bedridden, started with feeding myself with a spoon and fork. then a wheelchair, then a walker, then walking on my own 2 feet in small chunks, and then going from like 1,000 steps a day to 1,500, and then back down to 1,000, then 2,000. And then eventually, it got to the point where about 10 months after getting out of the hospital, like I said, I was in Hawaii and I was with my family. I ended up going on several hikes there. And there's one hike in particular where I knew I had crossed a certain milestone in recovery, that I knew I was never, ever going back to those trenches again, that this would never hit me as hard as it did. And it's when I hiked up a mountain with my mom and brother. My dad was at home working at the time, but we were in Hawaii and it was about 6 a.m. When we started, it was dark. There's no sunrise. We walked up the mountain. It wasn't too far. It was like a 30-minute hike. And I remember this is the most intense physical activity I had done in well over a couple of years, right? But I remember watching the sunrise, just coming up above the ocean water in Hawaii. I felt the breeze on my face. I felt the warm air, and it was just so fresh. And I thought to myself, man, 1 year ago, I thought my life was over. I would give anything just to be able to breathe normally again. I'd give anything just to sit up out of bed and look out the window with no symptoms. That was a year ago. That was my biggest wish. And here I am today, standing here on top of this mountain, wind on my face, watching the sunshine. It felt like the impossible had come true. And it was at that moment that I knew a certain chapter of my life had closed. That chapter of learning these difficult lessons and being forced to go through all these hardships, these symptoms, these hospital visits, these doctors and specialists, wondering if I'm ever going to get my life back. That chapter closed. And while that chapter closed, a new chapter opened where I said, if I did this in 10 months, imagine what life could be after that. I could be fit again. I could run down the beach into the sunset. I could wake up early and go on hikes. Because if I went from completely bedridden, drinking blended food, not a clue in the world how is it going to get better, there's no reason I can go from here on top of a mountain to being even more fit in the future. And it was a surreal moment. So that reintegration back into life phase, that was a couple years actually, but it didn't feel like a couple years. It actually felt longer, but it was so much fun and so enjoyable because I wasn't putting that pressure on myself to be this Superman fit person. I learned to enjoy what I had right now. Now, would it be nice to have been fit at that time? Yeah, would be nice, but I can't snap my fingers and have that happen. I knew these things take time. And this whole experience had also taught me patience because I knew I had to build up my threshold. So after that phase of reintegrating back into life, I started reintegrating back into exercise. And this was about 1.5 to 2 years after I got out of the hospital. Now, I was very severe. If you're watching this right now and you're just a few months into your illness, or 6 months, even a year, even a couple years into this illness, unless you are hospitalized, which it's rare that you're hospitalized right now, or else you wouldn't be watching this video right now. But I started from the bottom of the bottom. So that's why it took me 1.5 to 2 years to start working out again. And when I say working out, I mean actually going to the gym. I was at home doing a couple push-ups here and there. I was walking around. I was doing some bicep curls when I was bringing the groceries in, right? And I was doing some physical things, but I never actually made exercise a priority until 1.5 to 2 years later, right? Now, here's something interesting. When I was at a functional level, when I was living life like a normal person, and I introduced exercise again, even very light workouts, I started to feel the symptoms again. But because I understood how recovery works and I understood the recovery science blueprint, and I'd been through this journey, I've been through so many flare-ups, but leveled up after each flare-up, which is something we teach on this channel, I was able to not freak out when the symptoms came back. And it didn't come back full force, but every time I tried working out, it would hit me, right? And I had to stop working out for another handful of weeks, even a couple months. And then I went back to the gym, then stopped, then went back to the gym, and stopped. And eventually you just build it up. But your biggest tool, your biggest superpower in getting fit again is going to be patience and consistency. You have to understand that you literally need to build yourself up, maybe from the ground up when it comes to fitness, right? And that doesn't happen overnight. You can't just put all this pressure on your nervous system and expect it to adapt just like that, because you have a hypersensitive nervous system. You need to retrain it to be less hypersensitive. So one of the biggest tools you have right now, or that you have to learn in order to overcome this, is patience. going through progress cycles. And progress cycles, that's something we also teach within our programs. But essentially you increase activity or introduce a workout, even a light workout, could be 5 push-ups off the counter, right? That's going to bring up some symptoms. And then you have to dial it back, respond well to the symptoms. And then if you do that right, then you actually level up, right? So with a nervous system issue like this, when you crash, right, or when this thing hits you, think of that like a nervous system injury. Now, when you're working out in the gym, let's say I'm doing bench press, right? If I do bench press and I'm sore, like today, I'm actually very sore. I did bench press, I did chest day 2 days ago. If I were to go back into the gym today and do the same workout I did 2 days ago, that's gonna just wreck my chest. I'll be extra sore, and that won't be effective at all because I'm not allowing my body to recover. Now, if I did that exact same workout again the day after that, so basically 3 workouts in a row without allowing my body to recover, I'm gonna tear something. I can almost guarantee I'll tear a tendon, I'll tear a muscle, it will not be good. And why did that happen? It's because I wasn't patient. So your nervous system works in similar ways. You have to add some kind of stress to it, but then you need to pull back and let it recalibrate, let it recover. And then you go back and do a little bit more. Sometimes it's not so black and white like that because there are different things that put pressure on your nervous system. But for the sake of this video, in terms of getting back into fitness, that's kind of how it works. It's a very gradual introduction of exercises, responding well to symptoms, and then repeating that cycle, going through that progress cycle essentially. So once I introduced exercise again, I just built up consistency. And I still remember, almost like it was yesterday, doing 10 push-ups and then feeling out of breath and then feeling a bit of nausea come on. I remember that like it was yesterday. Meanwhile, that was maybe 3 years ago, right? Three or 4 years ago. But just the other day, I did bench press. I do about 100 push-ups a day when I'm on vacation, right? When I don't have a gym, I'll do 100 push-ups and I'm fine, right? I'll do it every day. So now I can do very intense exercise. I've built myself up to a point where I could push myself to my limits. And I mean my absolute limits. My face is drenched in sweat, there's sweat pouring off my face. But the only way that I've gotten here is to understand what's really going on in my body and fixing the right thing, fixing my hypersensitive nervous system. And there's a specific way that I did that, following the recovery principles, everything I teach on this channel, patience is going to be your best friend here. Patience and consistency. When I say consistency, I mean consistent sticking to the recovery principles, not sticking to going to the gym every day. You have to be consistent in following the recovery principles if you want to go from surviving to thriving. So in a nutshell, I've been through this whole journey. This has been, quite the lengthy video, but I'm really glad to say that now I have my life back. I don't have to worry about symptoms. I don't have to worry about flaring up. I could go for runs on the beach. I can go for runs into the sunset. I can go hiking and watch the sunrise, right? I could go traveling. I can work out as hard as I can and I won't pay the price for it. In fact, I could work out harder now than I could before. But now I'm able to balance it out with proper rest and proper recovery and healthy diet. But most of all, I'm able to reduce the mental stress that I put on myself for all those years. And that is one of the culprits that led me to getting sick in the first place. So I can honestly say with full confidence that today I do have thriving health and I don't have these limitations on my life that I did, just a few short years ago. And the cool thing is I'm not special. I'm a regular person just like you. I'm just like the other 6 billion people on this planet. Yes, we have all our differences. Yes, we're unique, but at the very core, I'm just a human being. I don't have a superpower. I didn't take some magical pill to get me out of this mess. I built myself into what I am today. I built myself into the person who can go on these long runs, who can work out, who can look and feel fit in their body, and no longer has to worry about these symptoms popping up, right? And I started at the very bottom. And I've showed so many other people all around the world these exact same principles, not only to help them get rid of the symptoms, but to help them become fit again, help them get their lives back. If I could do it, if all these other people around the world could do it, then you can absolutely do it too. And I believe in you. And I think if you're here watching this video right now, or about an hour in, you wouldn't be watching this if you didn't have that small seed of hope inside of you, knowing that there is a brighter future ahead. So I just want to let you know, no matter where you're at, even if you're in a freaking hospital right now, if you're bedridden at home, if you're unable to go to the gym, if you feel like you've lost your identity, if you feel like your life was stripped away from you and like the universe is punishing you, well, guess what? This is an opportunity to reinvent yourself into something bigger and better than you could have ever imagined. And I can tell you, after witnessing this journey so many times, not only with myself, but with other people and working very closely with them, I can confidently tell you that right now, things may not make sense. You can only connect the dots looking back. It was Steve Jobs who said that famous quote. When you're in the moment, when you're in the middle of the chaos, it does not make sense. You're probably asking yourself, why is this happening to me? You know, why can't I work out anymore? Why am I not the same person I used to be? Who am I? But I can tell you that down the road, when you come out of this, when you get your life back, you're able to have thriving health again, which is going to come for you. You're going to look back and everything will make sense, and you're going to actually be grateful that you've been on this journey. This is the most powerful way that your mind and your body, your physical body, can come together and be on the same page. And when those two come together and they work in harmony, that's when you become unstoppable. And that's when you have true thriving health. But that wouldn't have happened if you didn't go through this experience. So I'm here for you. I can totally empathize with what you're going through. If you've been an athlete before and you had that stripped away from you, just know that there is hope, and I'm here to help. So if you did want some extra help, this is exactly what we help people with. You know, it is a very complex journey to navigate on your own. You can feel like you're in the middle of the ocean on a rowboat, not knowing which direction is the island, and you're lost in this massive body of water for days or weeks or months, some of you even years, maybe even decades. You don't know which direction to row in, but you're rowing as hard as you can with this paddle. But if we zoom out, it can also feel like you're rowing in big circles sometimes. So that's where we come in. Someone like myself, with a recovery system we built, and we look at your situation, we say, hey, you know what? Here's a compass, here's a map of where you are. We actually need to go in that direction. So here's what you need to do, here's the game plan. In fact, let me jump in that boat with you and help you row so you don't have to do this all on your own. If that's something you're looking for, if you did want some extra support, you can click the link down below and see how we're helping people all over the world recover from their hypersensitive nervous system issues and how we help them go from surviving to thriving. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've poured out as much as I can into this topic, and I really hope it resonates with you and you're able to take some of this information, whether we work together or not, take this information and try to apply it and implement it into your life, because these are the principles that are changing so many lives around the world, and these are going to change yours. So hope you enjoyed this. Give this video a like, give it a thumbs up, comment down below if you resonate with any part of this story at all. Also, let us know what was your biggest takeaway. We love to see your comments and interact with you. And always remember, no matter what you're going through, no matter how difficult the journey is, you are a thriver, and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. I'll see you in the next video.
I'd say that CFS recovery is absolutely the real deal.
I actually felt like somebody had an answer, like somebody explained what was going on, and it all clicked.